Have you ever wondered just how vast the Roman Empire was at the height of its power? And if we placed the map of ancient Rome over the modern world, which countries today would fall within its borders? At its territorial peak in the early 2nd century AD, under Emperor Trajan, the Roman Empire stretched across an enormous expanse of land. From Britain in the northwest, through much of Western and Southern Europe, around the Mediterranean Sea, across North Africa, and deep into the Middle East. On a modern map, Roman rule once covered all or part of the territories of dozens of present-day countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Italy, the Balkan countries, Greece, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and many other regions. It was an empire covering roughly 5 million square kilometers, home to tens of millions of people belonging to countless ethnic groups, languages, and cultures, all living under the authority of Rome. But perhaps the most remarkable thing is this: Rome did not begin as an empire. There were no enormous Roman armies, no thousands of kilometers of Roman roads, no provinces stretching across 3 continents, and certainly no Mediterranean world almost entirely controlled by Rome. In the beginning, Rome was little more than a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber River in the Italian Peninsula, surrounded by communities and peoples who were, in many cases, more powerful than the Romans themselves. So how did such a small city rise to power, defeat one formidable enemy after another, and eventually become one of the greatest empires in human history? How quickly did Rome expand? Which territories did it conquer first? And when did Rome cease to be merely a regional power and begin its transformation into the master of the Mediterranean world? To find the answers, let us turn back the wheel of time more than 2,700 years to an age before the Roman Empire existed, before Julius Caesar, Augustus, or Trajan. We will follow Rome's expansion step by step across the map, from a tiny territory in central Italy, through centuries of warfare and conquest, until Roman power stretched across 3 continents. And that extraordinary journey begins in a remarkably humble place, a small city on the banks of the Tiber River, in the 8th century BC. To understand how Rome eventually came to dominate the Mediterranean world, we must return to the beginning, when Rome was still only a small settlement in central Italy. According to Roman tradition, the city was founded in 753 BC on the banks of the Tiber River. Its location would prove extremely important. The river provided water and transportation, while nearby routes connected the interior of the Italian Peninsula with the coast. Built around a series of hills, Rome also possessed natural defensive advantages. But early Rome was far from powerful. Central Italy was divided among numerous peoples and communities. To the north lived the wealthy and sophisticated Etruscans. Other neighboring groups included the Latins, Sabines, Volsci, and Aequi. Rome was only one settlement among many competing for land, resources, and influence. During the traditional period of the Roman kings, from 753 to 509 BC, the city gradually grew in population, wealth, and military strength. Rome absorbed neighboring communities, fought local wars, and increasingly extended its influence over the surrounding territory. Etruscan culture also had a major impact on the developing city, influencing Roman religion, architecture, engineering, and political traditions. Then, according to Roman tradition, a dramatic political transformation occurred in 509 BC. The last king, Tarquinius Superbus, was expelled, and the Roman Republic was established. Yet the birth of the Republic did not make Rome secure. In fact, the young state was surrounded by rivals and repeatedly threatened by war. To survive, Rome would have to fight. And over the next 2 centuries, those wars would completely transform the balance of power in Italy. Rome would defeat its neighbors, overcome powerful coalitions, and gradually extend its influence far beyond the banks of the Tiber. The small city was about to begin its first great era of expansion, and the conquest of the Italian Peninsula would become the foundation upon which the future Roman Empire was built. After the establishment of the Roman Republic in 509 BC, Rome was still far from controlling Italy. The peninsula was divided among powerful peoples, independent cities, and competing alliances. If Rome wanted to survive, it first had to defeat the enemies surrounding it. During the 5th and 4th centuries BC, the Romans fought repeated wars against neighboring Latin communities, the Volsci, the Aequi, and the Etruscans. One of Rome's most important early victories came with the capture of the Etruscan city of Veii in 396 BC. Located only a short distance north of Rome, Veii had been a dangerous rival for generations. Its defeat significantly expanded Roman territory. But Rome's rise was nearly stopped in 390 BC, when a Gallic army defeated the Romans at the Battle of the Allia and entered Rome itself. Although the city recovered, the disaster demonstrated how vulnerable the Republic remained. Rome soon resumed its expansion. Its greatest struggle for control of central Italy came during the Three Samnite Wars, fought between 343 and 290 BC. The Samnites were fierce mountain warriors who controlled much of the central and southern Apennines. The conflict lasted for decades and included humiliating Roman defeats, but Rome's manpower, alliances, colonies, and ability to rebuild its armies eventually proved decisive. By the early 3rd century BC, Rome dominated much of central Italy. But one major obstacle remained in the south: the wealthy Greek cities of Magna Graecia. When Rome came into conflict with Tarentum, the city called upon King Pyrrhus of Epirus for assistance. Pyrrhus brought a powerful Hellenistic army, including war elephants, to Italy. He defeated the Romans in several battles, but his victories came at enormous cost, giving history the expression Pyrrhic victory. Unable to destroy Rome's seemingly endless ability to raise new armies, Pyrrhus eventually withdrew from Italy in 275 BC. By 264 BC, Rome had become the dominant power across almost the entire Italian peninsula. But this victory created a new situation. Across the narrow waters from southern Italy stood Sicily, and beyond Sicily lay Carthage, the greatest naval power in the western Mediterranean. Rome's struggle for Italy was ending. Its struggle for the Mediterranean was about to begin. By 264 BC, Rome had become the dominant power in Italy. But just across the sea stood another great power, Carthage. Based in North Africa, Carthage controlled a wealthy maritime empire stretching across parts of Sicily, Sardinia, North Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula. A confrontation between the two powers was becoming increasingly difficult to avoid. The First Punic War began in 264 BC, largely over control of Sicily. Rome was primarily a land power, while Carthage possessed one of the strongest navies in the Mediterranean. To compete, the Romans built large fleets and learned naval warfare through costly experience. After more than 2 decades of fighting, Carthage was defeated in 241 BC. Sicily became Rome's first overseas province, and Rome later took control of Sardinia and Corsica. But Carthage was not finished. In 218 BC, the Second Punic War began. The Carthaginian commander Hannibal launched one of history's most famous military campaigns, marching from Spain, crossing the Alps, and invading Italy. He inflicted devastating defeats on Rome at the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and especially Cannae in 216 BC, where tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed. Yet Rome refused to surrender. Instead of seeking peace, the Republic raised new armies, attacked Carthaginian positions elsewhere, and gradually weakened Hannibal's support. Roman forces eventually carried the war into North Africa. In 202 BC, Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama, ending Carthage's ability to challenge Rome as an equal. The final confrontation came in the Third Punic War. In 146 BC, Roman forces captured and destroyed Carthage, and its North African territories were reorganized under Roman control. Meanwhile, Roman expansion continued in Hispania, where decades of warfare gradually brought large areas of the Iberian Peninsula under Roman authority. In little more than a century, Rome had transformed dramatically. It was no longer simply the master of Italy. It controlled islands, provinces, ports, and territories across the western Mediterranean. But even before Carthage disappeared, Roman armies had already begun looking east. Across the Adriatic lay Macedonia, Greece, and the wealthy kingdoms of the Hellenistic world. Rome's next great expansion was about to begin. While Rome was defeating Carthage and expanding across the western Mediterranean, its attention was also turning east. Beyond the Adriatic Sea lay the wealthy and politically divided Hellenistic world, dominated by kingdoms that had emerged from the empire of Alexander the Great. Rome's involvement in the region intensified during the Second Punic War, when King Philip V of Macedonia allied himself with Hannibal. Although the First Macedonian War ended without a decisive Roman conquest, it marked the beginning of Rome's long intervention in Greek affairs. The struggle resumed in 200 BC with the Second Macedonian War. Roman legions confronted the Macedonian phalanx, one of the most famous military formations of the ancient world. In 197 BC, at the Battle of Cynocephalae, the flexible Roman legion defeated Philip V's forces. Macedonia was weakened, and Roman influence over Greece increased dramatically. Rome initially presented itself as the defender of Greek freedom. But Roman involvement soon became increasingly direct. A new challenge emerged when Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire attempted to expand his influence into Greece. Rome defeated his forces at Thermopylae and later at the Battle of Magnesia in 190 BC. The settlement that followed forced Antiochus to surrender much of his power in Asia Minor, demonstrating that Roman military influence now extended far beyond Italy. Macedonia made one final attempt to resist. In 168 BC, King Perseus faced the Romans at the Battle of Pydna. The Macedonian phalanx was once again defeated, and the Old Kingdom was eventually transformed into a Roman province. Then came the decisive year of 146 BC. In the west, Rome destroyed Carthage. In the east, Roman forces defeated the Achaean League and captured Corinth. The city was looted and destroyed, sending a clear message throughout the Greek world. Resistance to Roman authority could bring devastating consequences. By the middle of the 2nd century BC, Rome had become the dominant power on both sides of the Mediterranean. Yet conquest in the east did more than expand Rome's territory. Greek art, philosophy, literature, architecture, and education increasingly influenced Roman society itself. Rome had conquered Greece militarily, but Greek culture would profoundly reshape Rome. And while Roman power expanded eastward, an ambitious general would soon push Rome's northern frontier farther than ever before. His name was Julius Caesar. By the middle of the 1st century BC, Rome already dominated Italy, much of the western Mediterranean, Greece, and large territories in the east. Yet one of the greatest expansions in Roman history was still to come. It would be driven by a commander whose victories transformed both Rome's borders and its political future, Julius Caesar. In 58 BC, Caesar began a series of campaigns in Gaul, a vast region covering most of modern France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and parts of Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands. Gaul was not a single united kingdom. It was divided among numerous tribes, often competing with one another. Caesar used these rivalries, Roman alliances, diplomacy, and military force to intervene repeatedly in the region. What began as a campaign presented as the defense of Roman interests quickly became a war of conquest. Over the following years, Caesar's legions marched across enormous distances, defeating tribal armies and building roads, bridges, camps, and fortifications with remarkable speed. In 55 BC, Caesar constructed a bridge across the Rhine and led Roman troops into Germanic territory, demonstrating that even the great river was not an absolute barrier to Roman power. That same year, he crossed the English Channel and launched the first of 2 expeditions to Britain. These invasions did not result in the permanent Roman conquest of the island, but they extended Rome's military reach beyond the known boundaries of its existing provinces. The greatest challenge came in 52 BC, when numerous Gallic tribes united under Vercingetorix. After a difficult campaign, Caesar trapped his enemy inside the fortified town of Alesia. Roman troops built an extraordinary double line of fortifications, one facing inward to contain Vercingetorix and another facing outward against a massive Gallic relief army. The Romans survived attacks from both directions. Vercingetorix eventually surrendered. By around 50 BC, organized resistance had largely collapsed. Gaul was brought under Roman domination, giving Rome control over a huge new territory and pushing its effective frontier toward the Rhine. The conquest brought immense wealth, slaves, and resources to Rome. It also gave Caesar something even more dangerous: an experienced army personally loyal to him and a level of fame few Roman commanders had ever achieved. Caesar's victories had dramatically expanded the Roman world, but they also helped destabilize the Republic itself. Soon, Caesar would cross another river, the Rubicon. This time, his legions would not be marching against foreign enemies. They would be marching toward Rome. Caesar's conquest of Gaul had greatly expanded Roman territory, but his rise also accelerated the political collapse of the Republic. After years of civil war, assassination, and rivalry, Caesar's adopted heir Octavian emerged victorious. In 27 BC, Octavian received the title Augustus. This moment is traditionally regarded as the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus inherited a vast state, but Roman expansion did not stop. His armies completed the conquest of northern Hispania, secured the Alpine regions, and pushed Roman influence deeper into the Balkans. Territories along the Danube were gradually brought under Roman control, strengthening the empire's northern frontier. Egypt had also become one of Rome's most valuable possessions. After Octavian defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Egypt was annexed the following year. Its enormous agricultural wealth, especially its grain production, became vital to the Roman economy and the population of the capital. Augustus also sought to expand Roman power beyond the Rhine into Germania. For several years, Roman commanders campaigned east of the river, and it appeared that the region might become another Roman province. Then came disaster. In AD 9, 3 Roman legions under Publius Quinctilius Varus were ambushed by Germanic forces led by Arminius in the Teutoburg forest. The Roman army was virtually annihilated. The defeat shocked Rome and changed its ambitions in the region. Although Roman armies later returned to Germania, permanent expansion deep beyond the Rhine was abandoned. By the end of Augustus's reign in AD 14, Rome had been transformed. The Mediterranean was surrounded by Roman territories, while the Rhine and Danube increasingly defined the empire's northern limits. Rome was no longer a republic expanding through competing generals. It was now an empire ruled by an emperor, and its appetite for new territory was far from over. In the decades ahead, Roman legions would cross the sea once again, this time to conquer Britain. After the death of Augustus in AD 14, Rome already controlled an enormous territory surrounding the Mediterranean. Yet the emperors who followed him continued to search for opportunities to strengthen and expand the empire. One of the most important new conquests began under Emperor Claudius. In AD 43, a Roman invasion force crossed the English Channel and landed in Britain. Julius Caesar had launched expeditions to the island nearly a century earlier, but he had never established permanent Roman rule there. Claudius intended to change that. Roman legions defeated several British tribes and gradually advanced across southern and central Britain. Roads, forts, and new settlements followed the soldiers, allowing Rome to consolidate control over conquered territory. But resistance was fierce. In AD 60 or 61, Queen Boudica of the Iceni led a massive revolt against Roman rule. Her forces destroyed several Roman settlements, including Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium. For a moment, Rome's position in Britain appeared dangerously unstable. The Romans eventually regrouped and defeated Boudica's army, securing their hold over much of the island. In the following decades, Roman forces pushed farther north. Under the governor Agricola, armies campaigned deep into what is now Scotland. However, Rome never permanently conquered the entire island. Instead, the empire eventually established a more defensible northern frontier. Beginning in AD 122 under Emperor Hadrian, Hadrian's Wall stretched across northern Britain, marking one of the most famous boundaries of the Roman world. Elsewhere, Roman power continued to strengthen along the Rhine and Danube, while influence expanded in North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean. By the end of the 1st century AD, the Roman Empire had become a vast network of provinces connected by roads, ports, military bases, and trade routes. But Rome had not yet reached its greatest territorial extent. That moment would come under one of its most successful military emperors. His name was Trajan, and under his rule, the Roman Empire would become larger than ever before. When Trajan became emperor in AD 98, Rome already ruled the most powerful state in the Mediterranean world. But under his leadership, Roman expansion would reach its absolute peak. Trajan first turned his attention toward Dacia, a powerful kingdom north of the Danube in territory largely corresponding to modern Romania. Its king, Decebalus, had fought Rome before and remained a serious threat along the frontier. Trajan launched the First Dacian War in AD 101. Roman legions crossed the Danube and fought through difficult mountainous terrain. After intense campaigning, Decebalus accepted peace. But the settlement did not last. In AD 105, war began again. This time, Trajan intended to eliminate the Dacian kingdom permanently. Roman armies advanced toward the Dacian capital, Sarmizegetusa. By AD 106, Decebalus was defeated, and Dacia became a Roman province. The conquest gave Rome access to valuable resources, especially gold and other minerals. It also produced one of the most famous monuments of the Roman world, Trajan's Column, whose carved scenes depict the campaigns in remarkable detail. But Trajan's ambitions extended even farther east. In AD 106, the Nabatean kingdom was annexed, creating the province of Arabia Petraea. A few years later, Trajan launched a massive campaign against the Parthian Empire, Rome's great rival in the east. Beginning in AD 113, Roman forces advanced through Armenia and Mesopotamia. Trajan captured major cities, including Ctesiphon, the Parthian capital, and Roman armies reached the Persian Gulf. For a brief moment, Rome controlled territories farther east than at any other time in its history. By around AD 117, the Roman Empire had reached its maximum territorial extent, approximately 5 million square kilometers. On a modern map, Roman territory stretched from Britain to the Middle East, from the Rhine and Danube to the deserts of North Africa. It included all or parts of present-day countries such as the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Turkey, Romania, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Syria, Israel, Jordan, and Iraq, among many others. The Mediterranean had effectively become a Roman sea mare nostrum, our sea. But the empire's extraordinary size created an equally extraordinary problem. Every new province required soldiers. Every frontier required forts, roads, supplies, and money. Rebellions in the east revealed how difficult Trajan's latest conquests would be to hold. When Trajan died in AD 117, his successor Hadrian faced a fundamental question: should Rome continue expanding, or had the empire finally become too large to conquer any further? The age of relentless expansion was approaching its end. The age of defending the empire was about to begin. When Trajan died in AD 117, the Roman Empire had reached the greatest territorial extent in its history. But his successor, Hadrian, inherited a difficult reality. Conquering territory was one thing, holding it was another. Hadrian quickly abandoned several of Trajan's recent eastern conquests, particularly in Mesopotamia and Armenia. Rather than continuing an endless cycle of expansion, he focused on strengthening territories Rome could realistically defend. This represented a major change in Roman strategy. For centuries, Roman power had grown through conquest. Armies defeated neighboring peoples, new provinces were created, and the frontier moved steadily outward. Under Hadrian, the priority increasingly became consolidation. The emperor traveled extensively throughout the provinces, inspecting military installations and reinforcing vulnerable borders. Along the Rhine and Danube, Rome developed networks of forts, watchtowers, roads, and military settlements. These frontier systems helped control movement, protect trade routes, and allow troops to respond rapidly to threats. In Britain, the change was even more visible. Beginning in AD 122, Roman soldiers constructed Hadrian's Wall across northern England. Stretching for roughly 117 kilometers, the wall included forts, mile castles, gates, and observation towers. It was not simply a barrier. It was part of a sophisticated military frontier designed to regulate and defend Rome's northern boundary. Rome remained aggressive when necessary. Hadrian's successor, Antoninus Pius, temporarily pushed the frontier farther north in Britain and constructed the Antonine Wall. Later emperors also fought major wars along the Danube and in the east. But these campaigns rarely produced the kind of permanent territorial expansion seen during the Republic or under Trajan. The reason was simple: the empire was already enormous. From Britain to Egypt and from the Atlantic coast to the Middle East, Rome had to protect thousands of kilometers of frontier. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers required food, weapons, salaries, roads, forts, animals, and constant logistical support. Expansion had once strengthened Rome by bringing new land, wealth, and manpower. Now, further conquest could also create new vulnerabilities. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had entered a new stage in its history. The central question was no longer how much more territory could be conquered. It was how such a vast empire could be held together. And in the centuries ahead, that challenge would become increasingly difficult. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had achieved something almost unimaginable. A city that had begun as a small settlement beside the Tiber River now ruled an empire stretching across 3 continents. But the enormous territory that demonstrated Rome's strength would also become one of its greatest challenges. Thousands of kilometers of frontier had to be defended. Along the Rhine and Danube, Roman troops faced increasing pressure from Germanic peoples and other groups beyond the borders. In the east, Rome repeatedly fought powerful rivals, first the Parthian Empire and later the Sasanian Empire. In Britain, North Africa, and other frontier regions, soldiers had to guard forts, roads, towns, and strategic routes. Maintaining this system required enormous resources. The Roman state had to pay and supply hundreds of thousands of soldiers, maintain roads and fortifications, transport grain and weapons across great distances, and respond rapidly whenever rebellion or invasion threatened a province. During the 3rd century AD, these pressures became far more dangerous. Civil wars, political instability, economic problems, disease, and repeated invasions pushed the empire into a prolonged crisis. Emperors rose and fell with extraordinary speed, while armies were increasingly forced to fight both foreign enemies and rival Roman factions. Rome would survive these crises and continue for centuries. But the age in which its borders steadily advanced across the map was largely over. The story of Roman territory increasingly became a story of defense, reorganization, division, and eventually contraction. And yet, when we look back at Rome's expansion, the scale of the transformation remains extraordinary. According to Roman tradition, Rome began in 753 BC as a small city in central Italy. Over the following centuries, it defeated neighboring peoples, conquered the Italian Peninsula, destroyed Carthage, dominated Greece, absorbed vast territories in the east, conquered Gaul, invaded Britain, crossed the Danube, and pushed Roman armies as far as Mesopotamia. At its greatest extent under Emperor Trajan around AD 117, the Roman Empire covered approximately 5 million square kilometers and ruled tens of millions of people. Its roads connected distant provinces. Its ports linked the Mediterranean. Its armies guarded frontiers thousands of kilometers apart. Roman cities, laws, languages, engineering, and political institutions left influences that survived long after Roman rule itself disappeared. The journey from a settlement beside the Tiber to one of history's greatest empires had taken centuries of warfare, diplomacy, engineering, adaptation, and sacrifice. But now we want to hear from you. Which stage of Rome's expansion do you think was the most important? Was it the conquest of Italy, the defeat of Carthage, Caesar's conquest of Gaul, or the campaigns of Trajan? Share your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoyed traveling across centuries of Roman history with us, please give this video a like, share it with other history enthusiasts, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about ancient Rome, its armies, its greatest battles, and the people who shaped the ancient world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next journey into history.